I was going to go straight to like that conversation on why on earth you would choose to embark on creating, you know, what is going to be like a multi-million-dollar product that solves a great problem, but is a very big task and mission.
I mean, I think there was definitely like a monumental level of naivety to it. Like if you really I think about it and like I think back to when I had the idea for Femtech and I was like, this will be fine. Like 3 months will be done. Because like you think of like every fitness influencer who's launched activewear and they like work with the manufacturer and 2 months later it's like, you know, Instagram post, big thing coming, and then there's like activewear and you're like, oh, how much harder can tech be? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that much harder.
Yeah. High-tech wearable, clothing.
Yeah. Same. No, not same.
What's the elevator pitch for Femtech?
The elevator pitch.
Because I'm thinking, and I know you've made a post about this, well, why wouldn't I just use the Aura Ring? And I'm sure you've thought about that 1,000 times and people may have brought it up. So do you want to give us the elevator pitch?
So the elevator pitch for Femtech, it is the first menstrual-focused smart ring built to elevate women's lives and actually work with their menstrual cycle. Whereas the Aura Ring is a fantastic wearable. Like I don't question that.
We don't want to get sued.
Not going to get sued here, but it is not built around the menstrual cycle, as is no other wearable. Because wearables take all the available research and the majority of the research is built on the male model. It's just easier working with men in research. You know, you don't worry about the menstrual cycle, any fluctuations. When women are included in the research, menstrual cycle phases aren't verified. They don't confirm ovulation. So everything is built on the male model, as is Aura. Now they're starting to work with partnerships with like natural cycles and they're starting to work with women's cycles. And like I remember hearing that and I was like, you motherfuckers, like I've been working on this shit for 2.5 years and it's taken that long because obviously it's like self-funded. And then these fuckers like swoop in and you're like, oh, goddamn. But that's always going to be the case, isn't it? But they're two totally different things.
Okay. Ben, did you want to?
No,
I know you had plenty of stuff.
Let's roll with that. So like, is there an official launch yet or are we still in like waiting list?
Oh, good Lord. Like I would hope that the launch would be in about 2 months. We'll open to pre-orders. There's just so much that has to happen behind the scenes and it's so hard because it's like some of the stuff you're obviously not going to publicly talk about because we're talking about, you know, trade secrets. We're talking about things that are happening with the electronic components that we need to refine. But it's such a lengthy process. And every single time you think you're done, oh, no. Let me give you another $40,000 bill.
Why do it?
You're not done.
Because to embark on something like that, the problem has to be big enough. And usually some of the best businesses or things like this that end up being created, you're trying to solve your own problem. Was that for you or you just saw an opportunity in a market? Like, why did you even decide to go on this mission?
Honestly, it was just the where I found myself with my coaching business and like the clients that were coming to me and how supremely fucked up they were, how many issues they had. And it's like some of the things I wanted to get them to do, I couldn't get them to do. So it was like trying to get them to take their morning temperature was like pulling teeth. So I could never know where they actually were in their cycle. Trying to then like streamline all of the data that I was able to get was really hard. You're like jumping around between like your coaching platform and your emails and then this other program. And then one client uses this program to track their cycle, another one uses this, and it's just impossible to streamline. And then it's like putting all of those things together. You're like, okay, well, what can I do? And so like, yes, I saw a gap in the market, but the move wasn't from the gap in the market. The move was from my own frustrations of working in the industry. And I think that's important because I actually had, I posted in a fertility group and I had this girl reach out and she's like, I've just graduated from Stanford, like computer sciences. And I really want to do what you do because I posted about Femtech. And she's like, you know, how did you get there? And I was like, I got here through being passionate about my own industry and finding a problem and wanting to help people. I didn't get here going, I want to be a schoolionaire. I want to create a device and crack into the wearable market because, you know, it's so challenging and wouldn't that be amazing? I just went, here's my problem. I want to help people. I want to help my clients. even if it breaks even and I just make back what I've invested into it, great. And it's there. So that's where it came from. And like, I think hearing that, she was a bit like, oh, okay, I thought you had like some better advice. And I was like, no, just
To me, that's the best
go
advice.
and work, find what you're passionate
You're solving
about.
a problem that's very fulfilling and intrinsic to you. And so when shit gets really hard, your ability to push through will be so much greater because you're driven by something that is much more meaningful to you.
And it's so practical as well. Like what you're looking at is like removing the friction out of some of the behaviors to get that data. You know what I mean? So A, getting the data, B, enabling like just a smooth way for someone to get that data for you, right? Can we backstep a little bit? Just for the sake of like giving it some context to like, as a coach, why are you looking for that data? You know what I mean? Like what is it like, did this come around because of the conversations you were having around training or nutrition or fertility or?
I mean, like all of it.
Yeah.
Porque no lo sos? Like all of it. It's like I think every client was coming to me with an issue, right? And like I think if you look at what a personal trainer used to be versus what personal trainers and coaches have now evolved into, which is amazing, right? Because like think back 10 years, there weren't coaches like us 10 years ago. You were there.
Yeah, OG.
You're
Big
OG.
dog.
You were there. But you weren't the common coach.
Yeah,
You weren't,
it's rare.
you know, you were so rare. And so you had so many people with so many issues that weren't able to be helped or fixed, whereas now they can go, every other coach is like really well equipped, right? And so it's like all these clients were coming to me with all these issues with fertility, with their menstrual cycles, with stress physiology, with their gut health, with everything. And it was like trying to pull any data from them. And then it's like, okay, cool, go and buy a $200 chest strap. Go and buy this watch. Go and buy this. Like the average person isn't going to be able to afford all of this shit that like, even though it makes your job easier, they can't afford that. And like you can't in good conscience ask one of your clients to go and buy all that stuff when like, you know you don't necessarily need it, because do we really need a chest strap monitor to know that our heart rate is fucked? No. Do we really need a chest strap monitor to know that we're stressed and our HRV is fucked? No. But it makes it easier. Like it's glaringly obvious for them when they see it. But yeah, it was just like all of these issues were coming, and it's like, cool, what can you create, which is like unique to women, because that's what my client base is. And what can you create that's actually at a reasonable price point, giving you the information you need, putting it into a way that you can easily work with it, which is what we're developing at the moment, which is the practitioner portal. So that's going to be where coaches can log in, can see all of their clients' data from the night that they've actually slept, where they are in their cycle, HRV, heart rate, everything that they're logging, and actually work with it. So yeah, it was really about trying to create something that was like easy and makes it easy for everyone involved. It's like, you know, there's some coaches out there who try and create these big platforms because they want to take away from the pie from all these other coaches, where it's like, no, I'll build this website and everyone can, you know, use my programs and fuck PTs and, you know, no one will ever go to PT again. And it's like, well, no, that's not what I want. I want to help the actual coaches who want that information to help their clients.
And so like is it going to be a platform designed for practitioners and coaches to work with patients and clients, or is it going to also be like just a client who looking after themselves through like an app and guided by, you know, what's going on?
So both. So
Awesome.
the client has their device that they purchase and they have their app that they can use. And if they don't have a practitioner or a coach or anything like that, that's cool. They can use their own data. They can see what's going on with them. They can learn that body literacy, because there's a huge lack of body literacy and a huge disconnect with a lot of women. Like there was some study where they looked at couples in a fertility clinic and they asked them, do you know when you're fertile? And it was like 70 or 80% of them were like, yep, we know. Liars. And then it was like out of the 70 or 80% who actually said, yes, we know, it was like 10 to 15% could actually identify the fertile window. So you have couples going to fertility clinics,
Yeah.
spending fuck tons of money, and they don't even know when they're fertile.
This is brilliant. Okay, can you then dive into what are the clearest indicators in your observation of when a woman is ovulating, when she is most fertile? What are you telling your women? What should they look out for? symptoms and signs?
It's all cervical mucus. So there's cervical mucus and your cervix position, which is like a lot of women get a bit squeamish.
Can you measure that? You get under there, you can feel that?
It's an internal feeling. So
Okay.
it's like you'll put your finger into your vagina and you can actually feel what your cervix feels like, and it changes based on where in your cycle. So the way men might actually know it, which is like, it's kind of like
Nah, do it because it's going to be really helpful.
gross, but not. Sometimes men are going to feel like they can go deeper
Mm-hmm.
in different phases of a woman's menstrual cycle, particularly when she's close to ovulation, because that cervix moves up. So it's like you can feel like you can go a bit deeper. You're not hitting that cervix as hard.
Okay.
Whereas outside of that cervix is going to be a bit lower. So that's something. You know. Tomorrow, like text message, hey.
Gotcha.
So
I tested it.
I tested it, and you were right.
I'll need to do like everyday testing and then to try to get the tape measure out. Okay.
Yep.
So discharge,
Cervical mucus,
cervical
and
mucus
then
and-
cervix position are the key ones. And then some women do LH strips as well, but LH is one of those tricky ones which I actually posted about the other day, where we typically do have that LH surge that
it's
occurs.
luteinizing hormone for people who don't know.
I get really bad with my abbreviations, and then I'm like, oh yeah, everyone knows what I'm talking about. No.
You go check. It's all good.
You have that LH surge before you ovulate, but that doesn't happen that way for a lot of women. So some women have short LH surges where they'll never pick it up with a test. Some women have multiple surges. Some women will have a surge and then it plateaus and it won't get picked up. There's huge variations between the actual upper and lower limits of the surges that we get between women. And then you have women with PCOS whose LH sits higher and is always going to be triggering an LH
It's
test.
unreliable.
Like semi-reliable, but
In a healthy woman, perhaps it's more reliable.
in a very specific type of woman.
Specific type of woman. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Okay. And then I wanted to ask about the luteal phase.
What about it?
I wanted to ask because Ben and I, we have many strategies for managing a woman's PMS symptoms and luteal phase. And time and time again, as you see it all the time, it can be very debilitating for a lot of women. How do you go about communicating not only like nutrition and supplementation, but also psychology of how they should manage their own well-being during that time?
Yeah. So I think when you break down what is actually happening with the luteal phase, right? You've ovulated. Your basal metabolic capacity increases after that time, which is something that a lot of women don't know, a lot of coaches don't know. So you're roughly burning 200 to 400 more calories a day. With that extra output that's occurring, like think back to what happens with you, like as a man, when you're all of a sudden in a 400 calorie deficit. Like what do you feel like?
Oh, I see. That's a really good example. Yeah, so you were talking energy, mood, you know, okay.
Like straight away, pull 400 calories out of your day.
Interesting.
And you're like, ooh, I don't know how I'm feeling.
Okay.
So the very first thing that I think with the luteal phase that needs to be factored in is that you're obviously having a bigger deficit with your energy. So all of that is going to have flow-on effects. So every single time someone says, to me about their luteal phase, they're like, oh, I have this extreme fatigue in my luteal phase. No, you fucking don't. You're just not eating. Like eat an extra 400 calories a day and then tell me if you have an extreme fatigue.
Oh, interesting. So you think, I don't know if you could percentage it. So you have observed that majority, I don't know, like what percentage of women do you think are just under eating during that time and it's exacerbating symptoms to an extent where that could be almost completely reduced if they just ate more?
I mean, what percentage of women are under eating 99% of the time, not just in their luteal phase?
Facts.
It's a high percentage,
so it's a big,
but
this is
even more so.
So it's a big point of call that you go to is before supplements, before like all these other things, we're going increase energy, go, you need to eat more.
Yep. I mean, it's the basics. It's like everyone, I think people get a little bit, like people are doing like seed cycling now, which like there's no basis to like eating different seeds at parts of your menstrual cycle. And people try to go like really deep into it, whereas sometimes it's like just take a step back, go to the basics.
Yeah.
Are you eating enough? Are you sleeping enough? Those are the main things. But then it's like, yeah, obviously we're going to have huge changes in our mood and energy in our luteal phase. When we're looking at women who have PMDD, there's a decrease in how serotonin binds to your serotonin receptors in your luteal phase for some women. So that's why we have such huge PMDD symptoms and sufferers. But like that's such a small piece of the puzzle, because yes, we also have, and I mean, it's like, how far do you backtrack now? Because it's like you're talking about women who have issues with their luteal phases. B6 is really crucial in mood stabilization. What's one of the things that depletes B6 the most? Oral contraceptive. And so what do women who have, I mean, like, you know, Benny talks about this all the time, how food now doesn't have as many nutrients as it used to. So we don't have enough nutrients. Our diets are shit. We're depleting ourselves of nutrients anyway. Then we're feeling like shit. So we go on the pill. We go on the pill because we're moody or we've got issues with our period. And then we come off the pill and there's a huge depletion of B6. And then it's like everything is 10 times worse than it was before. Or like,
when you need it the most, you've got it the least.
Yeah.
You're well said.
That was great. Okay, so like you really touched on some really important points there around nutrition as well. Like, do you have any sort of like general training, you know, points just on that luteal phase that you've sort of found, you know, working with tons of women now? Like, what would you sort of say, just from like an output perspective? We just talked about like, you know, the difference there with like from a caloric perspective. What would you say just on the training front?
So the luteal phase, you really have to separate it into early luteal and late luteal, because it's like when you look at that textbook chart of what is happening, right, they're day and night between early luteal phase and late luteal phase. In one phase, everything is peaking. In another phase, everything is dropping. So you can't treat both phases the same way when it comes to training. In that early luteal phase, you're going to have great energy output. You're obviously burning more calories. You're going to feel fantastic as far as training goes. Progesterone is pumping.
Yep.
Our ligaments, our mood, everything is going to be feeling good. Progesterone is incredibly protective to our ligaments. So from that perspective, you're going to be able to do a lot of things in the gym and you're going to feel fantastic in the gym. When you then go into your late luteal phase, when everything is dipping down, that's when we kind of go, okay, everything is going down, stands to reason we should be going down too. So that's when you'd be moving more into like some unilateral movements, some rehab, some prehab. You might not be going for PBs or killing yourself or doing a HIIT or anything like that, and just tapering it down a little bit. You don't have to go crazy in terms of training with your menstrual cycle, working with your menstrual cycle in the gym, but you absolutely can make those kinds of small adjustments in terms of like, cool, here's my program, I'm going to get my period in 2 days. Maybe I won't do high intensity stuff right now. Maybe I'll pull it back a bit. Maybe I'll decrease the RPE just a little bit.
Yeah. And so for those listening, like, you know, I can tell you for like, as an example of something I may do is like have that discussion around load, have that discussion around volume or frequency. And so just kind of like just generally pulling things back, particularly in that late luteal phase, that last, you know, week or so prior to the bleed. But another method that I do, and I'm not too sure if you have done anything similar to this, and I think this came about more so when I get more and more fertility clients, like is kind of saying, look, why don't we use this as a way to transition away from like pure weights training focus? Because that's the type of clientele, like there's a selection bias. The type of women that come to me usually come from that background. I said, hey, can we start doing some things like some yoga or some Pilates? And it's kind of just prefacing like what I think might be beneficial throughout pregnancy as well. It's just kind of like having that transition away from just the pure loading. And I don't know if we'll get to talk about this today, but it's just like, you know, when you have a really fit woman go to a pelvic floor physio, like what do they see compared to like the average gen pop? It's like the opposite type of situation, right? And so it's just like, hey, you're really good at bracing and you're really good at like creating that intra-abdominal pressure and you've developed like that to be so good with training. But when it's time to have a baby,
not as helpful.
We want to go somewhere else with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've actually used that as part of the process before falling pregnant to say, hey, like let's talk about the cycle, the menstrual cycle as it relates to training. Can we pull back away from weights training, not just the load and frequency and volume conversation, and go, can we get some Pilates in? Can we try some yoga? And then in my opinion, I think that's going to become beneficial for when you do fall pregnant. And I need you to sort of like embrace it a little bit and realize that there's more to life than just pounding that barbell.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like,
Oh, for sure. I'm all for that. I don't personally do it because yoga is the most boring thing known to mankind. And like, if you told me when all
Hold on, are you doing yin yoga or like a vinyasa flow where it gets challenging? What are you doing?
You know what?
You're going to say all of it, aren't you?
All of it is just, there's an umbrella that's called yoga and I do not.
it's a four-letter word that doesn't fly with Olivia, right?
Yeah, no, it's not a vibe for me. I'm a little bit too dopamine dominant for yoga, which is probably why I need to do it. Like I know. But yeah, absolutely. If you've got someone who actually is open to that and able to change their training in that perspective and actually embrace it a little bit, because I think it's like we've spent so long being like men and women are equal, we're the same, and not embracing the parts of femininity that come with our menstrual cycle. That it's almost like a lot of women are really closed off to that. I'm just closed off to it because yoga sucks. But
yeah, for me, and
But
again,
yeah.
I definitely don't push it. Like I suppose like the outcomes you're looking for is like having a form of like physical movement that's not as like intense a stimulus
Yeah.
as weights training, perhaps having something that also creates like a mindfulness and like almost that body literacy.
Yeah.
It's like, look, let's have an awareness of what's going on through a behavior that kind of like creates that presence right now. And, just give yourself the opportunity to, not beat yourself into the ground on that late luteal phase. So,
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
With luteal phase, again, B6, we're all big fans, right? We're propping up the B6 industry here. Now, I've seen from literature, now correct me if you feel or observe differently, it's about 50 to 100 milligrams somewhere seems to be the clinically effective dose. Is that what you've seen as well? Like, how do you like to distribute vitamin B6 across an entire cycle, particularly luteal phase?
So that greatly depends on two things. Are you talking about someone who has
Intense PMS symptoms.
so they've got a deficiency in it?
Likely.
Okay, so then I probably would not be going to like doses which are tested in research where it's like, oh, here's the recommended daily intake.
higher?
Or like, yeah. So I'd definitely be going higher, but obviously it's like with everything, right? When you go higher with one thing, there's going to be follow-on effects.
Yep.
So I typically take B6 in 250 to 500 milligrams and we'll start after ovulation, later in that luteal phase if possible, just to mitigate some of those symptoms. If we're going into something that's like 100 or 200 milligrams, that's something that I will go, okay, you know what, you can take it all cycle, but it depends how severe the PMS symptoms are. For one of my clients who she's PMDD,
Yeah.
she takes it every single day and then increases her dose after she ovulates.
Do you prefer confirming B6 deficiency with bloods, or is going with nutrition enough for you, or do you combine the both?
I mean, you absolutely can look at a lot of therapeutic testing and try and assess if there's a deficiency that way.
Or is it
But
symptoms
it's like,
more for you as well?
But it's like,
Yeah?
if you know, you know.
Okay.
Like if you're shitting liquid all the time, do you need a stool test to know your guts are fucked? Probably not, like, you know.
Okay.
So it's the same thing with B6. Like if you're telling me that you are emotional, that you don't have a handle on your emotions after you ovulate, that you're crying at the drop of a hat, you know, you're really sensitive, you want to break up with your boyfriend every single cycle, do I need to send you off to get any bloods done or anything?
Or even a psychologist, you might be very quick to be like, you need a psych. It's like, girl, you ain't
need
got
some
no
B6,
nutrients.
yeah.
Right?
Speaking of
Exactly.
nutrients, like what else is on the menu
Yes.
there? Like, do you go with some zinc or some omega-3s?
Big fan of both of those.
Yeah.
Magnesium, obviously,
Yes.
which is like most important over everything, magnesium.
Do you like going pretty high for that as well? Do you stay within maybe 300, 400, 500 milligrams, or base it off body weight?
So it's basing off body weight, and this is something that learned from the goat. We base off body weight. And really it's like you have to look at their diet as well, because like, yes, you can base it off body weight, but if their diet is super rich in magnesium, then basing that dosage of magnesium off their body weight with like a supplement, they're just going to be shitting themselves. And this is something I did to myself in prep where you can think back. like 6 years. And I remember hearing Benny be like, here is your dosage per milligram of kilogram of body weight. I was like, awesome. And then I was shitting myself every morning. And I was like, what is going on with my guts? Oh, my God. It was actually my coach at the time. And he was like, how much magnesium have you been taking? And I was like, I'm 65 kilos. I've been taking 650 milligrams, 700 milligrams. And he's like, but is that on top of everything that you're eating? I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay, maybe let's stop that and see. And it's like, magic next day. I'm not shitting myself. So definitely assess that tolerance where it's go to 300 milligrams, 400 milligrams, and then see.
You'll know.
You'll know the next
Look,
day.
Alex and I have a lot of, we should have shares in gluten-free precinct, right? Because we shill their bread to every single Australian client we have. I don't know. Have you got your clients on this magnesium bread?
We're propping up this company.
Shop at Kingston Market.
They're all over.
It's a little. He's great.
So for anyone who doesn't know this, there's a brand here in Australia, Gluten-Free Precinct. They do a sprouted basan loaf, which is chickpea. It's 660 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams of the bread, which is 2 thick slices or 3 thin slices of the bread. That's ridiculous. That's 2 serves of your average good magnesium powder.
Yep.
Now I've eaten whole loaves of this bread in a day. Right? And when I've posted that on my Instagram, everyone's like, oh man, are you shitting yourself on the toilet? And I'm like, no, it's different, right? So when you get that much magnesium in a whole food, in the food matrix, everyone thinks about it, we're thinking magnesium glycinate, magnesium threonate, magnesium orotate or whatever it is. And it's if you put grams and grams of that stuff down as a powder, into the gut, you're going to have an osmotic gradient there that the body's going to fix up real quickly and you're going to have a trip to the toilet.
Yeah.
Right. But if you have the magical, mythical basan loaf, you just don't run into those issues.
Yeah.
But since getting clients on it, in all honesty, the amount of supplementation of magnesium is so much lower. So much lower.
I still do it because I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of the accuracy of whether there's that amount of magnesium in that bread. I'm just skeptical.
Yeah, you're absolutely entitled to be, but it's a case of when you're running the magnesium tests on a follow up, you can see it move the needle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and it's not to say that the supplemental magnesium doesn't have its place. I still have it there, absolutely, but build the base with the bread.
Well, but that's everything, right? You can't turn to supplements to fix gaps in nutrition or lifestyle issues. And it's
lifestyle,
what do clients always say to you when they have an issue? What supplement can I take for this? And so although we're sitting here being B6 is great, magnesium is great, zinc is great, they don't fix poor lifestyle habits. They don't fix holistic approaches.
If you're still on the pill, it's we're just trying to put out a fire here.
Yeah.
We don't actually get into the root of it.
We were joking the other week because we put Fruit Loops in our nutrition tracker. We're it's the most nutrient dense food there. Right?
Did you see this, Olivia?
It's got one of the highest iron contents.
Yes.
What else?
Top 5 iron,
folic acid.
Okay, yeah, of course.
Anyway, having a joke, we weren't saying that everyone should go eat Fruit Loops, but
I am.
He's looking for a sponsorship.
I am.
But no, so the common nutritional supplements that might be useful, B6, magnesium, zinc, omega-3s.
Yep.
Is there any other maybe obscure things that you find effective that maybe people don't know about or even we don't know about? Or is that really just the big heavy hitters there?
NAC, obviously. NAC is a huge one in terms of menstrual health. It's really awesome in endometriosis and PCOS.
Mm-hmm.
Resveratrol is also awesome for women with endometriosis.
Okay.
And those are ones that yes, obviously the majority of symptoms that women have when they're same thing, it's the same thing that I'm repeating over and over. It's lifestyle driven. So the majority of those issues aren't going to be fixed with these supplements, but when you fix the underlying lifestyle issue or nutritional issue, they have phenomenal effects. So they're major ones, but I'm a big, big fan of NAC. Huge.
Throughout the whole cycle?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And
until
that's
symptoms dissipate, or really as a kind of a staple?
That's just a staple
most of the year.
Yeah.
What dosage?
I tend to go between 1,200 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams a day. But it depends, obviously, on the individual. Some individuals, onions are super high in NAC and the way that we process them. So it's like if someone's fucking hammering onions all day, every day, then like, do they need as much supplementation?
Interesting.
Probably not.
Yep.
But it's like,
Yeah.
Do you ever have a preference to going a glutathione itself or a liposomal glutathione?
so this is a really interesting conversation, and I think Benny will have a solid opinion on this. I prefer to go to NAC as opposed to glutathione because you need to be able to recirculate glutathione, whereas obviously NAC is the precursor.
The output, yeah.
So I also recently learned, which I didn't know, that there's a glutathione negative feedback. So if you're taking exogenous glutathione, you stop producing your own glutathione. And that changes pretty quickly when you stop taking exogenous glutathione, but you stop your own glutathione production when you're taking exogenous glutathione.
Interesting. And that wouldn't happen with NAC because you're just giving the precursor.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like, look, if I've got anything to add to that, I would say that I've gone full circle on the NAC versus glutathione use over the years, and I probably find myself now like opting more with the NAC in a lot of situations. The conversion of like cysteine into glutathione is energy dependent, it's magnesium dependent. So there's a few more steps that go in there. So if you're suspicious of any problems along that, like you need glutamate, you need glycine, there's other amino acids that are involved. It's not the hardest thing in the world to kind of set that up to work well. The benefit you've got as well though is that like cysteine is also used for other things. Like one of them is taurine, and taurine's very, very important in a lot of other aspects of health as well. So, and I think those dosages that you mentioned are really applicable. I think, some of the benefit that's coming from the cysteine is the synthesis of the glutathione, and it's like kind of like global ramifications on health, on inflammation, on detoxification and all those things as well. So yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think it's a really good supplement for everything we've talked about.
Yeah. But glutathione, like it has its places, and there are some people that I would use glutathione with. The majority, I probably just go to NAC because I know what their habits are like.
Okay.
And I know that it's just probably better for them. And I know that they're complete babies. So if you give them glutathione and like liposomal glutathione where they have to like swish it around in their mouth, they're going to be bitching and moaning for the next 2 hours.
You worry about adherence, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it depends if you can get like a liposomal product at a decent cost as well. Like there's a huge difference in cost between N-acetylcysteine and any liposomal formulas. But every now and then you can get them like at really good, affordable prices. And one of the benefits that I like about a lot of the liposomal products is that you get that base of like the phosphatidylcholine in them as well, which for a lot of clients could be really beneficial too. Yeah. So you're getting that like that carrier that's actually acting as like a beneficial nutrient in some cases. It's why, we've talked about this in Discord before, Alex, about krill oil versus fish oil. We talk about the pros and cons, and I'm like, look, one of the biggest pros for me is the fact that you've got this phosphatidylcholine, for which a lot of people aren't getting anywhere near enough choline in their diet. Choline is one of the most nutrient deficient things when you look at the data, that and vitamin E, right? So benefits of both, obviously.
Yeah, trade-offs.
Yeah.
And it's actually interesting you mentioned choline as well, because I did genetic testing ages ago, and I remember my report said that one of my SNPs showed that I need more choline than your average person if I ever was to be pregnant. And if I was pregnant and didn't have enough choline, that's when you'd have issues as far as like babies being born with disabilities. And I was like, oh, interesting. How many people know that about themselves as well?
Oh.
And it's like, what, 2
Very
eggs
few.
is your choline for the day almost? 3
Yeah,
eggs?
well, it depends on the size of the eggs. If they're very large eggs, it might be 2, but it's sort of, we'd probably say more 3 to 4 if they're sort of like regular sized eggs, and you're going to cover off that choline intake. But again, it's not something you test on a lab. It's something when we look at his history though, like of nutritional intakes, that choline, vitamin E, very, very deficient in most people's diets. When you look at the importance in pregnancy, fertility and everything else, it just, the demand is through the roof, right?
Yeah.
So, but again, like, very good point there. We would go to eggs to get choline rather than, necessarily relying upon getting a liposomal anything product, right? You can get eggs in the diet, you're going to cover that off anyway.
Yeah, but how many clients have eggs for breakfast?
Yeah.
Well, that's our job. Well, to an extent. It's like make that analysis of how we can improve that behavior. And I think one thing that Ben and I have spent a lot of time is behavior. Is like, we know all this stuff, right? But if we don't have an ability to communicate it and effectively persuade and inspire change, then, man, we're not really doing a very effective job. I wonder, because I have to communicate differently to males and females, depending on their personality disposition as well, and where they sit on the big 5 personality traits. And I wonder if you, or what advice or feedback or observations you've made in how to communicate more effectively to females as a male coach, as we may not have a level of experience and relation to, because we're not a female.
I think it's always been really easy. It's like you can get away with so much more as a female than you can as a male coach coaching females. It's like, even if you think
Wait,
about...
you can get away with more as a male or a female?
A female.
Oh, okay.
Because it's like, think about in the gym, right? If I'm working with a client face-to-face, I can manhandle the fuck out of her. I can move her hips.
Yeah.
I can push her ass. I can grab her leg where I need to, and she's completely comfortable with it. Not the same thing for a man. Like, is she going to feel as comfortable if her male coach, obviously, you know, you're checking before, do you, like, I'll just show you here, whatever. But you still, it's like completely different. So it's like, as a female, there's a lot of things I can get away with, not necessarily under the guise of, like, you know, women and, like, you know, that communication or anything, but there's just like certain things just come a lot better
Of course.
from women. So, like, yes, I can get away with a little bit more in terms of, like, talking to clients, but then it's like everyone's individual.
Sure.
So some of my clients, they need a very stern hand, like very stern hand, and you need to, like, whack them over.
How do you
the
make
head.
that assessment? Because I can tell you're more that type of coach.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's like when I have a client who needs to be coddled, I'm like, ugh.
This is the feather or the brick. This is what I say. I'm like,
You just-
sometimes you got to be the feather, and sometimes you got to be the brick.
Yeah.
You know, that's the art of it. So
It really is, and that I think that's always something that I've struggled with is having that delicate approach. I think in my older age, it's easier because obviously you have experience and you can think back to, like, you know, when I went through this, it was a lot harder or whatever. So it's a little bit easier as you get older, but for me, it's never come naturally because I'm such a, like, if I'm doing something wrong, if there's something you can tell me to improve, tell me. Like, don't fuck around.
That's
don't
quite a masculine
fluff around. It's a
behavioural
very
trait.
masculine
Yeah.
behavioural trait. And so that comes through a lot in my coaching as well, where it's like there will be times where I obviously struggle to be a little bit more soft and feminine with clients. That said, we all get to that same end point. It's just about how quickly I can get there with some clients, how quickly I can be like, okay, this is what's going on. This is why you have this problem. Like, at what point do you get sick of your own shit and your own spiral and self-sabotaging yourself?
That I'm very curious, because I have had these conversations. I'm sure you have. At what point, I know it's individual, but there's things you see in someone and then you go there. What do you see in someone before you give them that hard conversation?
It's honestly, it's not like a hard, fast rule, but I would say that if it's over the space of a few weeks, we have identified, like, a key behaviour that's not good for you, right? So, perfect example, client with endometriosis can't have gluten, keeps fucking having gluten.
Yeah.
And
okay.
so it's like
What are you doing?
she goes for 6 weeks, great cycle, no issues, no pain, and then starts eating gluten again. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you doing that? And it's like, oh, you know, I just don't know how to say no. You know, I get pressured at work. People will say things about how I'm the healthy one and I have to eat gluten. And it's like, you have to be very careful, obviously, because you don't want to be like, you absolute fucking speckle, stop eating gluten. Do you not see what it's doing to you? And you have to kind of lead them to the point where they go, oh,
Yeah.
I'm self-sabotaging myself. Oh, I don't actually, you know, I don't want to be like these people at work who are eating gluten. They don't live in my body. They don't experience the pain I experience. You kind of have to, like, get them there. But really, you can see over the space of a few weeks if a client is constantly self-sabotaging themselves with habit. But it's not like, you know, once they do it twice and then it's whack over the head, you'll start to kind of see a bit of a pattern. But yeah.
So because you're still currently working with clients, right?
I am.
Is it still your main gig, coaching?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like, is it a niche now? Like, is it like fertility and menstrual issues yet, or?
I would say yes. There are clients who come to me who have no issues, and I'm like, oh, cool. What are we going to do with you? Absolutely anything.
Huge potential.
I love that feeling.
Potential. It's
I had
great.
one of those this week.
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And you're like, oh, okay, let's just try this program, and they respond perfectly. And you increase their food, and they respond perfectly. And you're like, oh my God, this is so great. But yeah, absolutely. The clients that have been coming to me over the last 5 years have really formed into like this niche of clients who are highly fucked up, a lot of issues, being run into the ground, whether that's through previous coaches, through work, through poor personal relationships. It's multifaceted. But yeah, it's absolutely become this niche of women with like huge issues. Huge issues.
What percentage of women, adult women, do you think go through under the umbrella of PMS issues, serious female issues, that is majority fixable?
I would say
The question is, how many women are suffering unnecessarily?
it's honestly, and it's like one of those figures that you're really plucking because it's anecdotal.
Of course.
But I would say easily like 95+%.
Okay. So that means 95% of the women you work with, you can have tremendous impact on to improve and change their health. PCOS, endo is like the end spectrum of that. I wanted to even ask about PMDD and to describe to people what it is, and at what threshold should women begin asking the question of whether they have this more serious dysphoric menstrual disorder? Like, at what point do the symptoms become, okay, this is something more than just nutrient deficiencies and PMS symptoms?
Yeah. I think in terms of like PMS and PMDD, it's if you've never experienced PMDD, you won't get it. And people will be like, oh, my PMS is so crazy. It's like, I'm so emotional. PMDD is like you quite literally want to kill yourself. Like you are suicidal. Your will to live is not there. Your inability to handle emotions is like you'd be sitting here, you'd say something, and that's like what we're going back to with like when you say things to clients and it's like, how do you say it? I have some clients with PMDD. After they ovulate, I can't say certain things because it will result in a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay, well, I'll just fucking wait 2 weeks for this conversation. But you have clients who are like they just have a complete inability to handle and regulate emotions during that time. Like, they will have relationships where their partner every cycle is getting just absolutely shit on. And you have people who are like women who are about to break up with their partner every single cycle because of how severe their symptoms are. It's like there's no real like scale of like how severe it has to be. But it's one of those things like, like when you're in love, right? You just know when it's PMDD versus PMS.
I think, but a lot of women don't even have the language to express, like they don't even know PMDD express.
They think it's normal.
Yeah.
Oh, like this is different, but it's like I have a client with hypermesis gravidosa through both of her pregnancies.
Oh.
And
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful soul, and great friend too. And until coaching her through HG, through 2 pregnancies,
Yep.
having coached so many women through pregnancies, and here, like it's hard, you know what I mean? There's so many things going on, and then you have a woman who suffers from HG, and you get to speak to them for, the whole 9 months, and it's just like, this is one of the hardest things I've ever seen somebody do day in, day out.
Yeah.
Not being able to eat, throwing up every single day, like bedridden every single day. And it's like, how could I know, because we're having this conversation every week, but like other people within your circle or outside of that circle, you could never truly explain the gravity of like what that does to someone. And so, and this particular client, she's so inspired to kind of like make a difference in that as a whole, having gone through it. So yeah,
It's a great example. Yeah. That's really rough. It's really rough because you have some women who like go through this beautiful pregnancy glow, and one of my clients in her early pregnancy had hives all over her face, and she was like, "What the fuck is this bullshit?" Like everyone says this pregnancy glow, that pregnancy's great, and this is what I look like. But yeah,
it's a nuclear glow.
Yeah, nuclear.
So with PMDD, what's your point of call? Like, how are you helping women address it? Because that's another level of intensity. Do you give them psychological support? Is there sometimes needing to intervene with pharmaceuticals? Like, where do you go?
So PMDD is the first point of call is always B6 and magnesium.
Yep.
There's actually some evidence to suggest, because of the issues with serotonin binding to the receptors, that magic mushrooms are actually really beneficial, but they're illegal everywhere. So you can't fucking do anything, can you?
No, you can find them.
Well, we will talk after this conversation then. Okay. But yeah, there's actually some evidence to show that if you microdose magic mushrooms, that it's actually going to help PMDD symptoms.
Has this been, is this clinical research or is this anecdote?
There's clinical research in terms of the serotonin and those receptors.
The mechanism.
And the mechanism and how it works and how it improves. And those are the same receptors that are affected through PMDD.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it makes you wonder why everything that has these kinds of effects can actually really help you is illegal. And then things like alcohol, legal.
If I need a laptop in front of me, but 60s, do you remember, Ben? Do you know? Like in the 60s and 70s, like a lot of these psychedelic drugs got banned. Even marijuana got scooped up to this as well. They started blaming marijuana on like black men raping like women, right? They started putting in media outlets like, because there was a competition between to use hemp as a tool to use for like clothing and things like that. And there was another gentleman who owned a newspaper company, and he would print how would I say, like things that were inaccurate about this new product, hemp, because it would go against his own business, because he had other materials that he was trying to use to grow his business as a newspaper company. And so it's not like it was based, I know we can agree, so it wasn't based in logic. It was based in money and fear.
Yep.
But now, in the last 10, 20 years, there's been a lot of new research coming out on psychedelics, which is very interesting. Is that something you have dove down, at least in observational reading or experience?
I can't say that it's something that I've delved too deeply into, not for any other reason than obviously time and resources are limited. I've read into it in terms of PMDD and those serotonin receptors and issues we may experience during that period. But as far as like, psychedelics and what may have led to them being illegal or anything like that, no, I can't say I've dove into it. I wish I had a really cool story to tell you.
I'm way behind on that too.
Yeah.
I get asked that, and I'm like, look, I haven't even like put my big toe in the water. That's how far. Like I just had not gone down there.
Because it's being used now to treat schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorders, like serious psychological issues. And this is very interesting to me because we all have clients who have dealt with very serious issues, and it comes to a point where you try this, and we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to entertain conversations like this once we get to that end point because of what we're starting to see. I wonder if you guys, like, what's your end point? Like, what's your like last, all right, hurrah to save someone from debilitating health?
I don't think I've gotten there yet.
You guys might be smarter than me then.
I don't, but it's like, I don't think it's that it's like,
but it's like this as well. It's like not just time and resources, but it's like, what are you going to do with that information? You're going to go underground and you're going to start prescribing medicinal mushrooms.
No, it would be outsourcing to like
that's right,
those experiences.
So it's just like it's not like just
2 milligrams of psilocybin per day, progressively over.
And I think that's what's one of the reasons which has kept me out of like the research. Like I have like so many other things that I love to research, right? And I look at that and I'm like, still legal, right? And they're like, yeah, and I'm like,
talk to me when it's legal.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Okay.
or when I shift countries to somewhere, where it's a bit more accepted. But look, I'm just way behind.
It's a fun conversation to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what we were saying at the start, where it's like I don't think I've gotten to that point yet where it's like the end of the rope, like final hurrah.
Yeah.
Because you would be shocked how easy it is to fix people when they actually do what they're supposed to do. And like when there's compliance and they sleep and they manage stress.
They stop self-sabotaging.
And they eat properly and they fucking drink their water and they stop drinking alcohol. And
Wait, this is exactly what sorry, it was in the Discord. It wasn't a podcast, but we did a digestion workshop not too long ago. And I think we were saying, I think you'll be shocked at how simple the stuff is that we do.
Yeah.
But what we're going to give it to you is in like a logical, sequential kind of order so that you can basically see what needs to be done. And this is foundational stuff. The fact of the matter is this is all Alex and I would do for 90% of people with gut problems that come to us, and it resolves everything. And like, you just don't see like the niche stuff come into it like a lot of the time, because like when you do what you're supposed to do and you build that foundation, 90% of it's resolved.
Yeah, like you don't need us.
So, and you try not to ever come across cocky or like with the assumption that everyone's going to get resolution through that. But it's just the numbers don't lie. It's just like these basics, when done well, usually work really well. It's like, was it last? What are we? 2022. So I think it was in 2020. I had 11 cases of amenorrhea come to me. I think I said this on Polly's podcast, and she was interviewing me about coaching, and I just said, so I had 11 cases of amenorrhea, and then I think it might have sounded like I gave those girls amenorrhea through my coaching, because I didn't clarify.
DM for coaching. You want amenorrhea?
Back to it, and I was like, that kind of sounded like I helped 11 women lose their periods.
Yeah, compete in bodybuilding.
And not through pregnancy. Yeah, exactly. Come to me. I'll sort you right out. I'll take that PMS right away. So anyway, if anyone heard that podcast, that was not what I meant. But anyway, so 9 of those cases resolved really, really quickly. You know what I mean? And there were 2 that were more challenging. And that's, to me, pretty reflective of like the selection bias of women that I would get come to me, which are usually have a healthy user bias anyway, but there's just things going on, training, cut that back, food, bring that, like just the basic stuff, right? So yeah.
Well, I did a podcast, it was maybe like a month or 2 months ago, and he was asking about training women in perimenopause and like what you need to do to support them. And I was like, the same fucking thing that you do the rest of the time. Like there's nothing magic about perimenopause. Like, yes, we see huge fluctuations in hormones. Yes, we see shorter and longer cycles, but everything you were doing to support yourself prior is going to be the same thing that works during, in terms of nutrition, in terms of decreasing alcohol, in terms of supporting your liver. All of that is going to be key. So it's not like there's some magic perimenopause pill. It's not like there's some magic perimenopause training program or hack. Like, just do what you're supposed to do, which most people don't know what to do, but just do what you're supposed to do.
It's not a number 1 selling book right there. I'm just letting you know, if that's the headline you're going to go with, that ain't going to fly. The marketing team's going to figure something out for that one.
The perimenopause cure, and then it's like, just eat 2,000 calories a day, 2 liters of water, 3 liters of water.
I have, we can all agree that being on the oral contraceptive pill is probably a really bad idea for, I'm trying not to be black and white, but I'm going to say like 99%, right? With all its detriments. We've talked about that. But what I'm less knowledgeable on, and I wonder if you are, what I'm less knowledgeable on, probably compared to you, is pill versus implanton versus progesterone IUD. Meaning, to me, those are lesser of evils.
How so?
Because symptoms, just symptoms. Copper. Let me go with copper then. But that's a question as well. With implanton versus progesterone IUD, how do you compare them to the pill? Are they all on equal playing fields with how much they will fuck you up? Or do you have like a hierarchy of like, if a woman is very resistive to doing another alternative?
I think the saving grace with the pill is that if it's not agreeing with you, you can just stop taking it the next day. And yes, it is for one of my clients years ago, she took the pill for 1 month because she didn't want to have her period in India. And it took her 2 years to get her period back, to have ovulatory cycles again. So
2 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I hear that.
It was fucked. It can take some women a really, really, really long time for those GnRH receptors to function again. For the majority, it doesn't. However, for some, it can. So I think that's the saving grace with the pill, where it's like, at least if you have adverse reactions, you can stop taking it. That is in your control. Whereas with the IUD,
they're in you. I see why you said that. Yeah, that's a very good point.
So it's like, it's not, I am not a fan of the pill at all. I think that it's incredibly useful for women who are in relationships with domestic violence, or in relationships where they don't have control of when they can have sex with their partner and they can't leave.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly important in that time. But for every other woman, I just don't believe that it's actually it's not the liberty that women need in terms of their health, or what it was sold as like the, take control of everything and feminist, and you can work as same as a man and you don't have to bleed or any of that. I don't think it's the same.
That's one conversation. We were talking about this before the camera started rolling.
Yeah.
And then you hinted at the other one, which is just the lack of transparency around, hey, what are the pros and cons about this type of intervention? And I don't even know that I can say that it's gotten better over the last 10 years or not. That's a really hard one actually for me to comment on, because
I don't think it has.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, no. I would say that I feel like a women's awareness around it is probably better, but it's probably not due to the fact that the people supplying that medication are giving better information. It's just
more of us.
Yeah.
It's just that they've got access to that information from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it still leaves a lot to be desired when, we're each getting a client and just explaining the benefits versus, some of the downfalls, and you can see, oh, I did not know that. Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
There's a lot, that goes on that is just not transparent.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I think it's also you can say that in terms of Australia, where in Australia, there's women who are a lot more clued on now because we're putting out that information. I do a lot of consults with clients in the UK because I work with Supplement Needs, and they're a UK-based company. So a lot of women have been coming to me with issues, and their body literacy is non-existent. Bodybuilding is still hugely popular in the UK, whereas I feel like here it's kind of on a downwards trend. And you have women who just have no idea what they're doing in terms of their health or what they're taking in the UK. So I definitely think that we're seeing some minor changes, but as an overarching thing over the last 10 years, you're 100% right. It's not coming from doctors or Western practitioners where women are getting this information.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you raised. I'm just so glad you said that, because that's something that I like to ask of people that present in different countries. It's when Broderick was here the other week, and I think something I asked him before the cameras were rolling is how have you found Australia, and just what generally do you find with the people that you interact with in Australia. And a lot of people that do this in the fitness world, they'll tell you, they'll say, wow, the quality of trainers you have in Australia is actually pretty exceptional.
Wow, yeah, we're really biased.
In comparison to other countries that they present in.
Yeah.
Which kind of gives you a bit of a lay of the land, you know what I mean? And hearing that, that literacy conversation with women in the UK versus the, women in Australia, it's really interesting. And it's well, what is the differentiating factor? Is it the information coming from the medical industry? Probably not. Do you know what I mean? Is it the information coming from the auxiliary, components of the health industry?
Yeah, but if the system's broken, you must empower the individual. We must empower the individual so they have the information to make better, more informed decisions. Unless, I think what you're doing though, Liv, is you are actually, I don't know, you seem like you're trying to actually change the system. I don't know if you're intentionally doing it, but by creating a product, you are, Femtech will begin to change the system or have an influence, I imagine, a ripple effect.
Well, I mean, that's what the hope is, and that's what the aim of the practitioner portal is. So the practitioner portal actually has a section in it which we're going to try to implement where different practitioners and coaches can leave notes for that client, which aren't accessible to the client, but are accessible to the practitioners working on that. So you may have Benny and I working on the same client. He goes in and he's doing all the nutrition and training, and I'm just working with her in terms of mindset, let's say. He goes in and says, I've done this and this and this because this is going on. I leave a note and say, I've done this and this and this because of this that she flagged for me. We know what we're doing. It's not like, how many times have you sent a client to get a massage or a treatment? What did the myotherapist say? Oh, something with my leg, quad, something in the front here, I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's that. They don't know.
There's no communication.
So that's what I'm trying to do is with the practitioner portal, bridge that gap.
That's
between
like a
healthcare
whole
industries.
business in itself without a ring. I just I'll just bring in this portal that's like a Teams for practitioners.
Yeah.
That is so useful because that's one of the biggest challenges I have as well. So that very scenario you talked about, if I have a client see a myotherapist or a physiotherapist or something like that, I'm like, here's what you do. Either as you're wrapping up the consult, hit the voice message button, they talk, or you get outside and by the time you get to your car before you hit turn the car on,
idea.
you leave me a voice message while it's still fresh in your head.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to just solve that exact problem.
Yep.
This to me is one of your biggest points of difference then as femtech. Aura doesn't do this. I can't integrate with back-end portals. A practitioner portal. That actually solves a really useful problem to thousands of health practitioners and coaches who want to better service their female clients. Sign me up.
Yeah, fucking trademark Aura, in case you're listening to this, if y'all launch something in the next month that's a practitioner portal, and fucking watching.
We're coming for you.
We're coming for you.
Get
you
the
have not seen the
get the
muscles
suits
here.
ready. I got my lawyers.
I have one.
Don't worry.
Lawyer, just one.
I want to go back to the conversation on the pill versus implant versus progesterone IUD. I believe, if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, the progesterone IUD is lower dosage compared to the pill, which some may argue is comparatively a little bit better. Do you observe that, or do you see it as equally as detrimental to the pill?
So it's detrimental in other ways. So with the pill, we see a lot of micronutrient deficiencies, like a fuckload. Magnesium, B6, B12, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, huge depletion of those. We see increases in copper. And so what's one of the things that many women do when they come off the pill because they don't want to be on a hormonal birth control, but they're too scared to get pregnant, they go get the copper IUD.
Yes.
So that's a problem in itself. So
That sounds like a good combination.
yeah. And they'll never get copper tested before they actually go and get the copper IUD. So they have their own issues. So in terms of the implant or in terms of an IUD, maybe they don't have those same micronutrient deficiencies or effects on our micronutrients, but they can migrate. They're incredibly painful to insert and remove. Removing them is a motherfucker. It's really difficult to get a doctor to listen to you and remove it if it's not hit the 5-year mark or 10-year mark of before it's expired.
Really?
Yeah. And this is something that there's always going to be someone who's like, oh, no, that's not true. I went to my doctor and he took it straight out.
Well, it's one person.
The overwhelming majority of women will say the same thing, that they went to their doctor, said, I want my IUD out, and they said no. Why? Why do you want it out? You just had it put in. So it's really hard to be removed. And it's and then you also think about how barbaric it is that you're having something shoved through your cervix without anesthetic. It's incredibly barbaric in that sense. So it has a host of other issues. But, the argument a lot of practitioners or coaches or health practitioners make in terms of the IUD is that it's localized in the uterus, whereas obviously the oral contraceptive we're taking, it's going through our gut, it's going through our liver, whereas the IUD is localized, we don't have a circulatory system. Like it doesn't have the potential to go anywhere else
Right.
in our body. I think the other really important argument to make and understand in terms of hormonal birth controls as well is that you take the minimum dosage, which you know has an effect on the overwhelming majority of people, and that's what the dosage is. So that's, you'll have other pills that, higher dosage, but the minimum dosage is the effect that has the suppression of ovulation for the majority of women. That can be way too much for some women. Some women don't need half of that to have the effects. And that's why sometimes you have women who have such extreme side effects coming off of the pill, because it's like, the analogy might be that one person needs a beer to get drunk and another person needs 2 beers. But you know that 2 beers is the minimum for you guys to get drunk, so everyone has to drink 2 beers. So you're going to get more fucked up from those 2 beers because you only need 1, whereas Benny needs 2, he's fine. So it's the same thing with contraceptives
Wow.
and pharmaceuticals.
That's a really good
And they
point.
do like a lot of studies. Obviously, a lot of research goes into this when they find all of these dosages. But yeah, you'll have that minimum dosage that you need to elicit a response. So that can be problematic in terms of when you come off of it, and what you actually need your body to be doing.
And so we can just kind of just really quickly tie this into, we did a podcast just the other week on blood work, right? And we just talked about some real basics and stuff like that. But the nutrients that we mentioned before, if you are taking the pill and wanted to perhaps just consider looking at your nutritional status of some of those things, they're fairly easy to get done. They're fairly cheap to get done. If you're going to look at like your B12, your folate, if you're going to look at like just a hematology panel, like a full blood exam, and actually check out how that relates to like a B12 deficiency and stuff like that. B6 is a little bit harder, but zinc and copper are fairly cheap as well. A physician may not come to the party quite so quickly with zinc and copper. It's a bit of a hard sell for them to just kind of like look at the mineral statuses of stuff. But independent testing, online testing, so cheap to get those minerals done. And it could really guide you in terms of like some of the conversations we had prior on dosages of those nutrients. Or just the considerations around nutrition as well.
Yeah. And so if you don't know about private testing or private blood testing in Australia, you should. iMedical, fantastic.
Yeah.
I always tell my clients, go to your GP. Here's the list of what we want. Get everything that you can that's bulk billed. Obviously, you have your Medicare that you pay for. And what we can't get, we'll get through iMedical.
Exactly.
But then you have some clients who go to their GP and they just go, it's not worth the hassle. It's not worth the time. It's not worth the stress. I'd rather just pay the $400, get everything I want tested, and not have to deal with the GP.
We're at a point now where, like, we've spent some time recently just building up a physician's, what do you call it? Like
Discord channel. Yeah.
Yeah, like just so like a contact
Resources.
list, I suppose, of like GPs that are sort of been very happy to work with us in some more extensive testing because they understand like some of the applications that we're looking at and the type of niche that we work with, which has been really good and is starting to become more of a national thing, not just localized down here in Melbourne, which is really good. But the other thing, and COVID brought this around, was like, now some of these physicians are doing teleconsults, which is great. So now some of the clients we've got over in Perth and stuff like that can consult with like some of the good physicians we have over here in Melbourne and get some of that extensive testing done. Bulk build, keeps the cost low, good experience with the doctor, because as we all know, there's nothing worse than wanting to achieve something and then having them have a terrible experience in the GP's office.
Yeah.
Which is
If we
common.
could just get this Femtech portal up and running, so we can get these physicians in on that'd be great, Liv, just saying.
That would be phenomenal. It honestly, the portal could be like its own standalone product where it's like you have physicians. Again, if anyone's fucking listening and about to rip off my ideas, you have your own standalone product where you have physicians and coaches communicating with each other and able to work with each other.
Killer.
So on the ring, like what is it tracking anything in regards to symptoms or anything like that? Like
Yeah, so the ring is tracking heart rate variability, and basal temperature overnight. It's also got an SpO2 reader in there, although to me it's like, what's the point of giving someone an SpO2 value if they don't know what to do with it, or if it's like almost like data overload. So that's just in there, not doing anything at the moment until there's more research to show what SpO2 in terms of a menstrual cycle can mean.
To not play devil's advocate, but to play like what it could be useful for. I don't know the percentage of women who have sleep apnea. It's much more common in men, but that like I'll always just look at that as a proxy. Like if I see that like below like 95, 90, 80, oh shit, like we got to look at this.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Are there any qualitative questions that go alongside with that objective data? Like are they answering like any questions on how are your symptoms on this or that? Or
so what there is in there at the moment is a daily tracker. So it's like, you know, feeling energized, weak, tired, etc. And then you've got obviously all of your fertility markers that you're tracking as well. There's a tonnage calculator in there, so you can log workouts and it gives you your total tonnage. And then that in relation to how you've recovered and where you are in your cycle is giving you notifications of like, cool, you've actually recovered really well. You might be able to pump up that total tonnage, increase that intensity a little bit. You're in this phase of your cycle, increase that a little bit because you've also recovered well. Hey, actually you haven't recovered as well, maybe like foot off the gas a little bit. So all of that is also coming through into the practitioner portal as well, where it's like you can see your client is saying they felt really weak over the last 4 days and you can see what is going on with their heart rate and heart rate variability, and you're like, okay, cool, this is what I need to change as well. So I think those are really important together. Because
Alex and I have a bit of a rudimentary kind of menstrual tracker, don't we?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
We have a spreadsheet.
Well, what is it?
Have you seen it? It's not bad.
It's
evolved over the years.
Yeah. Like
it's a drop-down menu that highlights automatically based on where their body weight is, so we can see why fluctuations are happening with body weight. You can really easily see.
Look, one of the things that we sort of encounter, especially along just forget everything we've sort of talked up until now, I suppose. Well, don't forget it, but like just think about it more from the context of body composition as the goal. You know what I mean? And then so we would get a lot of women clients who are menstruating, and then throughout the cycle, just various fluctuations happening with body composition as a whole, whether it's visually, whether it's on the scale weight, whether it's on the circumferences, like the traditional quantitative measures that we would use. And of course, when you're comparing like week 1 to week 3 or week 4 or whatever it is, you're comparing apples with oranges from a physiology standpoint. So one of the things we wanted to do was just say, okay, like let's give this some conditional formatting, like some color coding to the cycle, overlay it on the body weight, and then actually just help the women that we coach see, oh, look, if I compare day 1 to day 1, wow. If I compare day 14 to day 14, from my previous cycle, you can kind of see that progress from a body composition standpoint. Yep. And then as a bit of a sidebar to that, like we're often tracking symptoms. So whether it be things like energy or fatigue or the gut symptoms and stuff like that, it's just nice to have those alongside the menstrual cycle. So you can kind of like start picking up these patterns and then kind of like increasing that literacy as well.
Yeah.
But I can easily see your platform doing a level of that.
Yeah.
Probably it's already going to do that.
And I mean, that's what the goal is, to obviously make it easy for everyone to track and make it easy for coaches to work with that data, because it's like, you also think of like, you might have the most bomb spreadsheet in the world.
We do.
You do.
Absolutely.
You have the most bomb spreadsheet
DM if you want to buy
world.
It.
And
it's very expensive.
Put it on Etsy for $19.99.
$19.99.
See how many people buy it.
Yeah.
It's like a whole business. I bought a cash flow template on Etsy.
Losing my mind. It's thousands of dollars.
But then you have 1,000 people buy it for $19.99.
Yeah, and we've thought about this, and then we could definitely do that, but then the argument is it dilutes the point of difference that we have as coaches, that I do not know a single coach, I'm sure maybe there's one out there, probably not, that has the level of quality, comprehensive tracking that we use, because we have just been so detailed about upgrading it every year and getting it better. So I'm not concerned, but I'm aware.
You're protective of your intellectual property, rightfully
I guess so.
It's an absolute nerd sheet.
But
it's a super nerd sheet.
If you don't know what to do with that information, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, okay, things are color coding, and not know how important it is. Same thing as my questionnaire. I've spent 10 years developing my questionnaire that I have for clients.
Yeah.
It goes for 9 pages. It is insane. And I have a lot of coaches who have used it in the past as well, because like coach clients. I'm not concerned that they're going to steal my questionnaire. They probably have. They don't fucking know what to do with half the questions in there. They don't know why they're important. So cool, take it, but you don't know why it's important. Yeah. So to me, like devil's advocate in that way, like sell it if people don't know how fucking important it is.
As coaches or clients?
coaches. Like they'll buy it, but they don't know how important it is.
Oh, this is that conversation, in our industry about like, what's your like intellectual property and stuff like that. Now, at the end of the day, I'm like, look, at the end of I just haven't protected some of the stuff that I've put out there in the past because I'm just like, what are they going to do with it? Do you know what I mean? Like you can have it, but like good luck using it. You know what I mean? Without knowing like the ins and outs of like what it takes to actually go and do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, for sure.
Maybe we'll sell it. Do you want to buy it, Liv?
Sure. You see it in Femtech next month.
She's got it on the
Built
platform.
Yes.
Do we have time to keep going?
Oh,
Yeah?
we're good.
All right. I want to keep going. I have something. Do you have something?
I do, but you go.
I have a lot of things.
Oh, okay.
Oh, came on a podcast. Didn't expect to talk. Questions. What? What was I going to say? I was going to ask about binge eating.
Yeah.
How frequently do you encounter it with your clients?
It's not something that commonly comes to me anymore. That said, I've encountered it a lot in my years.
Maybe I won't ask about it. I don't know. Do you feel like you would have something meaningful to say on it, some insights, or maybe not? Because I'll take a left turn if you don't.
I mean, I think binge eating is... So there's two things with binge eating. There's why are you doing it? Are you just starving and you're restricted, heavily restricted, and that's why you're binging, which most women are. So give them food. Are you still binging? And then it's also the emotional side of things. If you are going to binge eating because you don't manage your stress, then let's remove the guilt from actually the act of binge eating. Remove the guilt because that's what kind of continues on that path. People get really guilty. Oh my God, I fucking ate a block of chocolate and they feel like shit. And before you actually do it, sit with it for a second. Do you want to do this? Yes, I do want to eat this block of chocolate. Cool, you're an adult. You made a decision. You're not guilty. You had choice. You made a decision. And that's what those are the two things where it's like remove the emotion and guilt and give them like other stress levers and actually give them food and don't restrict them because there's no such thing as a bad or a good food, right? There's food that's nutritionally dense and not as nutritionally dense, and then there's food that is not nutritionally dense and high in calories and not probably what you want to be eating anyway. So it's like remove that guilt, remove all of that, and then, oh, wow, magic, no more binge eating issues. But obviously there are some people who are incredibly complicated and have, huge issues and like.
Have you encountered them? What do you do then? If it's like trauma-based and things like that?
There was a psychologist that I used to refer out to, but the problem with psychologists is that and it's not like a problem, but it's like they don't like tracking. So they don't want clients to track. They want them to intuitively eat. But the problem with intuitive eating is that if you don't have nutritional literacy, you're dictated by your biochemistry, you're dictated by what's going on with your gut health, and then it's like you're making decisions. It's like if you have issues with candida, right, and you have no nutritional literacy and you're intuitively eating, what are you going to reach for?
Sugar, carbs.
So it's like
your intuition is dumb.
Yeah. But like if you have nutritional literacy and you've tracked for a long time and you understand protein, fats and carbs and energy, then yes, I intuitively eat. I know what my carbs, my fats and my protein will be at every single day. But yeah, they don't like tracking. So then I get a little bit where I'm like, oh, do I want to send you to a psychologist who is going to recommend not tracking? But then it's also like, oh, well, great. Now you've got someone who's got trauma and you're practicing outside of your scope and it's very messy.
Yeah, you just absolutely, that was ideal. I what you just said then resonates with me so hard because I think on social media we see this a lot with health and fitness spokespeople talking about intuitive eating and stuff like that to whether it's the public, whether it's to their clients, and it's coming from a place of many years of experience tracking and monitoring portion controlling and having systems and literacy of nutrition there. And then thinking, oh, I'm done with that now because I'm not competing anymore. Or I'm not holding myself to the demands and standards that I once did. And look, I can just I don't track anything anymore. And look at me, I just hold good shape. And then thinking that that's something that's going to be intuitive for every person that comes along and hasn't had the same experience as you.
Yep.
So I absolutely agree with what you're saying there. And making that distinction is really important. I've encountered the same challenges, I suppose, working with counselors and psychologists with clients with binge eating as well. And I guess it's always just trying to be that conversation back and forth, which again, a platform would be really cool for this, hey? You know?
Yes.
It would be really cool. Anyway.
I agree.
To try and say, hey, look, can we go through a method of like kind of like stepping away block by block, you know, from this nutritional method to something like that, you know, so love it.
It's challenging. It's very challenging. And you obviously have people who have spent a very long time in the educational system and a very long time in dogmatic beliefs and spent a lot of money investing into their education. So to have their education questioned by someone who is not from that field.
Yeah, it's like the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Obviously. You've invested so much into one thing, you've publicly stated it, you've put so much money, time, and energy into it that I can't go back. Carnivore MD can never change his name.
I knew you were going to go there.
Of course.
Omnivore MD.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? I like that. Just, yeah.
It needs to be caveat MD.
Nuance MD.
Yeah.
Context MD. You'll get no followers. You'll be talking about just, you can't.
Like my perimenopause MD book.
Right. It's just too foundational.
Yeah, too foundational.
Right? No. Eat this food, you'll be fixed. Speaking of menopause, do you know much about menopause?
I mean, define much.
I'll give an example. My mother, she's in menopause, hot flashes, symptoms, and while it's a very multifaceted thing, she's an Egyptian woman, so she's stubborn in her ways and how she's going to change and my ability to inspire change with certain lifestyle things, and she's very impressionable to her doctor.
As most of our parents' generation is.
Yes, in spite of my existence. But I wonder if you have any low-hanging fruit, if you had to try and eradicate hot flushes and those moments that can be really debilitating for older women and just like take you out of your present state and changes your quality of life dramatically. Any remedies?
So keeping in mind that if you're talking about that archetype that isn't going to listen and is going to listen to their doctor, the lowest hanging fruit that I would be going for is obviously just make sure you're drinking enough water, make sure you're having some electrolytes, maybe wear some cotton so it breathes a bit better. So those are like the really low-hanging fruit where someone who is not going to do what you tell them to do, she's not going to listen to you when you're talking about supporting estrogen detoxification. She's not going to do what she needs to do in terms of that. So you're doing things that are going to make those symptoms probably not as intense. So obviously if she's wearing things like cotton and things that breathe a bit better, she's not going to feel them as badly.
Let's say there's now a person who's more open-minded. Where do you go there? Like with the estrogen detoxification, maybe nutrition and supplementation support?
Yeah, so that's someone where same principles of what I would be doing with someone who is perimenopausal, for someone who's in their fertile years, same thing, supporting estrogen detoxification. So the right foods, supporting phase 1, phase 2, making sure you're shitting properly, that's a big thing. So, you know, there's a lot of foods in the like broccoli, cauliflower family, which are great for estrogen detoxification. There are a lot of supplements like indole 3-carbinol, which are great in terms of that as well. So that's where I would be going, where it's like, okay, let's throw in some indole 3-carbinol, let's support there, let's remove alcohol, let's focus on protein because women have high protein oxidation anyway. So let's just increase protein. Let's have some more vegetables. Let's have some indole 3-carbinol.
NAC, glutathione?
Yeah, NAC.
For detoxification?
Decrease toxins if we can, which is the big thing. It's actually incredible and crazy how much alcohol we as a society consume. Where that's like the really tricky thing to get clients to stop doing is stop drinking. It's actually really insane. But yeah, that's the next hanging fruit where it's like start implementing those things. And then it's like obviously during that time we're having more anovulatory cycles, so you're not having the effects of progesterone to balance estradiol, because that's its primary role, is to balance estradiol. So you're not ovulating as much. You're not having those benefits. So you're having shorter cycles, more anovulatory cycles, more intense effects of estradiol. So it's like everything you can do to support that is what you want to be doing.
Okay.
Which is all the lifestyle things that you should be doing anyway. Managing sleep, not going to bed at 11 p.m. and scrolling on Facebook and playing solitaire, which every fucking mum does. So the main thing, stop playing solitaire before you go
Fuck
to bed.
solitaire. I got shit to do.
I wonder 20 years from now, like if the next generation of like menopausal women, like it would be like a different set of problems, like, you know, knowing what we know now versus, and you know, how I suppose, will there still be that same stubbornness with some of these behaviors and things like that? Or
I think so. I think that's a human trait. I think it'll just swing the other way. I think it'll be like so stubborn towards even being healthy. Like that becomes an obsession.
It does.
Like orthorexia, obsession with healthy eating, which I've engaged with. And you said it does. You observed this?
Yeah, I mean, I've
yourself?
experienced it.
Yeah?
Like I go to a cafe and they're like, do you want water? And I'm like,
Is it filtered?
No, you didn't filter it. Do you filter your coffee water? No.
Okay, so this I'm very conscious of because I have clients and people who are so overwhelmed and don't have the ability to critically think through decisions of like what to believe. They are so overwhelmed. Now they are stressful and anxious because of water, because of, you know, the 4G, 5G, because of mold, organic food versus non-organic, all of these things that I believe are, and I observe to be 1 to 2%ers before getting to the foundational rocks, but they're overwhelmed and they're anxious because they believe that these things are going to fuck their health, and now they're stressed and anxious because of it, because they can't do it or they can't afford it or whatever.
What about them?
That's just a comment on an observation. I'm just like...
It's a lot. I think every single person goes through that once they start to see the light of like what maybe what conscious living is and how to actually lead a lower tox, healthier lifestyle. I think every single person goes through that. And it's just, I guess it depends how long they spend in that. Because like, okay, so think about women, right? They start to eat healthier and they start to choose like better cuts of meat, more organic food. And then they start to filter their water. And then they start to decrease alcohol, take some of the supplements, go to sleep. And then they go and get their nails done. And then they go and get their eyelashes done. And then they go and get their hair done. And then they go and put a fake tan on so they feel nice because they're doing all of these things. And it's like removing all of that is hard because that really becomes part of someone's identity.
Yes.
You know, I like having my fake lashes. I like having my fake nails. I like having my fake tan. Everyone feels good with, like if you've competed, you know how fucking good you feel when you have a fake tan or a tan and how good everything looks. So you're taking away huge parts of like what their identity is to the point where they're like, well, am I even myself anymore?
Yeah.
And they're thinking of like, okay, well, what do I have to fully remove to be healthy, optimize fertility, my health, everything, and what can I keep? And it's hard. Because
What's your answer for that personally?
Honestly, I'm so aggressive with some of my approaches sometimes where I'm like, just fucking get rid of everything for like 3 months, see how you feel, and then start to put shit back in.
Yeah.
And see how you respond. Maybe your fake nails and your fake lashes and dyeing your hair isn't having that big of an effect on you.
Yeah.
But we won't know until we stop like plowing you with shit all the time. Mm-hmm. But obviously there's few and far between clients who are going to have that same mindset where they're okay with having everything pulled back.
I think it's one of the most effective ways, and Ben and I have talked about it, is if you can remove yourself from your environment, go away from everything just for a week or two, a couple of weeks, just be by yourself and have none of the usual your lifestyle. If you really at your wit's end, you're like, fuck, I don't know what to do. You try that and you just observe what changes, what happens.
You mean the client that has chronic gut conditions and then goes away on a holiday and then like has some alcohol, has some gluten, No symptoms, though, strangely enough, for the next 2 weeks.
It's
And
the
it's
gluten in Europe.
yeah.
It's different. I actually,
yeah.
it is. I believe it's pretty different.
It is.
Yeah.
But
That's a good reality check. You know, I love it when you can make a client have that kind of reality check as to some of the contributing factors or preceding events that lead to a lot of these symptoms. And then like, okay, now that we know, like, it's not feasible to ask you to like live a life that's a holiday, but like just let's let go of some of the things that maybe we were pointing the finger at or procrastinating on really addressing, you know, and get to the root cause, the stuff that matters.
Absolutely.
do you know what's funny? I think about what you just said, and like, you know, you think back to when you're a new coach and it's like you're getting all of this information overload as well, and you're like, oh my God, like this is the client that's like the 1%, like there's something pure really fucked up with them. And I remember actually asking Benny, and I was like, what do you think of like the wolf phenotype or something? It's like the people who can't sleep.
Yeah.
And his response to me, I remember being like, oh, well, that's not an answer. And it's only now that like I think back, I'm like, oh no, yeah, that was an answer. And he was like, oh, I wonder if they have the same issues if they go camping for 2 weeks and don't use their phone. And I was like,
It's a boss answer.
oh, okay. And it's like a goat boss answer, but it's 100%. Like all these people who are like, oh, I have sleep issues. No, you fucking do.
But see, it's very clever because you answer the question with a question.
Yeah.
You don't even answer it.
He's a good
He's a
teacher.
wizard.
He's a wizard.
So on the
Jacked wizard.
on the topic we were talking, you guys were just talking about before about like you know, sort of becoming very heavily hyper focused on health in all areas. You know, you were talking about that, and then the water at the cafes. I feel like that's like it's almost analogous to like, you know, when you're a trainer first coming in the industry and you're learning everything, and then it's like you can't apply everything, right? But you kind of have to go like too far to realize, oh, this is way too complicated. What am I doing? Like, I've got to backpedal here, simplify things, focus on what matters and things like that. I feel like, you know, in my experience, as you stand back over larger time frames and you watch people, like a lot of people will go through a process like that. It's like that 4 levels of mastery I talked about before. It's like, you know, you're unconsciously incompetent. People don't know that how some of their behaviors are so unhealthy, and then they begin to realize how they are. And you can get stuck there for a long time kind of going, it's like when I post up about sardines on Instagram and I get the same people go, what about the tin? What about the tins that are
What?
Oh man, like all the time. It's these same
Don't
people.
DM
And then
for coaching.
I look back through the DMs they've sent me, and it's always been when I've been doing something that you could consider relatively healthy, eating some fatty fish. And they're pointing out like a potential problem from a health perspective with what you're doing. What about this? What about that? And it's like, oh,
Calm down.
You're focusing on the wrong thing here. And given enough time, in my experience, I think a lot of people come off that hill and you're like, oh, why was I so focused on this? You know, you pointed out 3 or 4 cosmetic type things that a woman might be doing that might be contributing to, you know, some issues. And just having that realization like, oh, okay, I should probably stop focusing on organic everything if I'm also just going to take the liberty with some of these things, which might be significant.
Yeah.
Might be, might not be. It's one of those things where unfortunately you don't know unless sometimes you do genetic testing to know how certain things are going to work for that individual. But it's like the tin thing is crazy to me as well, because I got asked that in a podcast as well about tins, and I was like, ugh.
I'll get my fishing rod, champ. Just go fish.
I'm going to go fucking catch some tuna.
Yeah.
But
Or kill a bear with your hands. Okay.
In my
Primal.
perfect world, I wouldn't eat out of tins in my perfect world, but I don't live in my perfect world. I don't have the access to fucking grow tomatoes, so I'm going to have to buy a tin occasionally. And my chili tuna is really fucking tasty. So just like, this is where we're at. Lesser of the evils.
Yeah.
I did go through a phase of $9 sardines in a glass jar.
Fuck.
Really?
$9, man.
Yeah.
They're crazy.
This guy gets money. $9.
It's a quick way to lose money, I'll tell you.
That's you experiment with these things. But if you the point is, people, I made a post about this. The meme, the guy who has the 2 buttons, and you can either push the button for sleep, whole food nutrition, stress management, hydration, or no disrespect to Andrew Huberman, but Andrew Huberman telling you to eat sticks of butter. I love him. Or some other new fad or sexy biohack. Ben Greenfield loves biohacking, and people get very attracted to that quick fix. Oh, I'm going to spend $1,000. Like, you have light panels, right? But you've done the foundations first, and you've done a lot of research into light panels. There's people buying $1,000 light panel before you get 8-9 hours of sleep. What are you talking about? No.
I think people are really attached to a diagnosis. People, I think inherently, we all want to be special. We all want to know that, like, oh, this is the thing that was wrong with me.
Yeah,
like, think
an
about,
answer.
Yeah, an answer. Everyone
Sure.
wants an answer. Think about how many people go to 10 different practitioners with the same back issue, get told 10 different things. Oh, the last one was wrong. And they just desperately want an answer. We all desperately want to be part of something and included, vegetarianism, veganism, carnivore, like how many people have that shit in their bio? Like we desperately want to be part of something. So I think all of that just plays into it, where it's like you'll have people that go to those extremes because they just want to be part of something, have their answer.
Well, it gets rid of that uncertainty, right? And uncertainty
Yeah.
is an absolute killer. So if you can have a diagnosis, that you can identify with, at least you've now gotten rid of your uncertainty. But again, like, so in my experience, like I feel like when people have other facets of their life that they're getting a lot of fulfillment out of, or enjoyment or purpose and value, challenges that are leading to personal growth, then, and obviously this is sort of anecdotal from coaching clients, I feel like they let go of that unrelenting desire to have that diagnosis. It's like, you know what, I'm actually more chilled about it now. I don't need to have the answer set in black and white, because no one knows the answer. We're dealing with something and just gonna have to see what happens as we go through this process. But, in my experience, when someone's sort of like being more fulfilled or more purposeful in other facets of their life, that kind of tends to become less important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's like, and speaking of fear, like the apprehension and fear reminds me of something I wanted to ask you. When women, when you inevitably encourage women to come off the pill or some contraceptive method that's internal, there's a fear. Oh, I'm going to get pregnant. Oh, I won't know where my cycle is because I'm just coming off. How do you talk and communicate women through that?
So I feel like we're so failed by our education system in terms of learning about fertility. We learn about STDs. We learn that if you don't use a condom, you can get pregnant. And I get that in terms of teenagers and hormones and, not being able to control and think about repercussions of your actions. I get that. But we are so let down by our education system, where women and men don't know that women are only fertile 6 or so days out of every single cycle. Men are fertile every day of their lives. But provided they're not shooting out jank sperm, but they are fertile every single day, and women are only fertile 6 days out of every cycle.
Can you explain that 6 days really quickly for the many women who don't understand that?
Yeah, so that's prior to ovulation. The reason you are fertile like that 5 to 6 days is because of the sperm life. Sperm life has like a 5 to 6 day, 7-ish day kind of life. You have in your cervix, you have things called cervical crypts. So it's kind of like branches in your cervix that branch out. And that's where sperm will hang out.
They chill.
It's
like a chill room.
Yeah. So that's why you can get pregnant
Just waiting
5 days before you ovulate, because they just basically hang out and chill.
It's like the VIP section and you're just waiting for the right egg.
Yeah. So those are those 5 to 6 days, and that's when we start to see our peak mucus. That's when we go, okay, cool, this is our entry into our fertile window. Our crypts are opening. Any sex here can be, unprotected, can be resulting in a pregnancy. That said, when you look at the actual statistics of who gets pregnant in that phase, it's like a 20% likelihood.
Oh, is it really?
It's really low. And it's like something like 10 to 13% in the first cycle of try and get pregnant. And
Wait, hold up. The first 10 to, so what'd you say?
like 10 to 15% somewhere in there.
Hold on. After going off the pill?
No,
Well, you're saying
in general. So anyone who is trying to conceive in that first cycle of trying gets pregnant, about 10 to 15%, somewhere in there. It's like a really small amount.
why is that?
Do
you know?
we're just talking about luck, honestly. Quality of egg, quality of sperm.
Most people mistime it.
timing,
Okay.
I think timing's
I
would
thought
be
you
an
meant-
important one there because I feel like it takes couples a bit of like application, you know, over the months to kind of go, oh, we kind of may have missed that a little
Yeah.
bit. Fix that up second time, third time around. So
Yeah, but there's a lot of issues. Like you might have really low progesterone levels. You might have really short luteal phases. Your endometrium might not be thick enough for implantation. So there is nuance to it, but overwhelmingly it is timing. So the best timing, there's like this graph that I have that shows that the best timing for intercourse when you're trying to conceive is the day before ovulation or the day of ovulation. Those are your highest chances. But that doesn't mean that having sex 5 days before you ovulate can't result in a pregnancy.
Sure.
So to go back to what you were saying, you know, you have clients who are coming off the pill really anxious about getting pregnant. You're probably not going to get fucking pregnant anyway, straight away. And then you have clients who are like their partner's like, oh, well, I'm going to have to wear condoms all the time now. And you'll have the conversation with them when you're like, how often do you actually have sex? And they're like, oh, you know, once a week maybe. We're really busy once a week. It's like, okay, so once a week out of a 4-week cycle, because you have like 30-day cycles, you're telling me that once a week out of those 4 weeks, he can't wear a condom?
No, you got to finesse it. Guys, listen to me. If you can't finesse putting on a condom, where's the camera? Which camera am I looking at? If you can't finesse putting on a condom while you're, you know, getting on, right? We need to do a class. Call me, DM me, right?
Discord.
You do it at the same time. It's a new channel we have.
you're taking
going.
your coaching to another level, bro.
Of course, man. No, you got to finesse. You got to do it at the same time. But we're trying to downplay. It's like you can't get pregnant. It's very, very unlikely you're going to get pregnant coming off after the pill. That's the conversation you're having.
Yeah, and it's like, and I don't want to be really firm in saying that because obviously you're going to have people who are like, well, I got pregnant, or people who get pregnant accidentally, because to say that you can't is not true. To say the likelihood of it occurring is not that high is probably better. You're still working with, you know, after you ovulate, it's between days 6 to 10 where implantation actually occurs. So the egg fertilizes, travels down the fallopian tube, and then implants between days 6 to 10. If you've just come off the pill and you have a 6-day luteal phase or 5-day luteal phase, when is that egg going to have time to implant? It's not. And so that's why we really promote longer luteal phases, 10 to 14 days as a minimum. So it's really like the more they start to learn.
What do you mean promote?
In the sense of like you want to be working
Get towards
10 to 14 days.
Yeah.
So realistically, you're probably not going to get pregnant straight away after coming off of the pill. You're going to have huge micronutrient deficiencies anyway, and all of those micronutrients are really important in terms of progesterone production and healthy ovulation. So like focus on that, get to learn your body.
I would say that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
You know, so I've been waiting to ask you that question, but it's just like, if you're going to come off the pill, then that literacy is what you're after.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to know, because you mentioned before about like your UK clients versus Australian, and there's just a big difference in just general literacy on health there. Like in my experience, there's been quite a nutrition acquisition, like a fertility and cycle acquisition of learning when it comes to all of a sudden wanting to conceive. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you experience? Like, because I feel like, so like a lot of the women that I coach will go, so in the last 3 to 6 months, you've really learned a lot about your cycle. So prior to that, it sort of showed you where your baseline level of knowledge was. And then that's not the most conducive level of knowledge for not falling pregnant, you know, if you were coming off the pill.
Yep. Yeah, it's I would 100% agree that the most knowledge that comes for women is when they want to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Like that's where they stop fucking around. They are deep diving, they're reading everything. And it's honestly, it's so impressive because I'm part of so many forums on Facebook, and some of the shit women say in there, I'm like, how do you know this? Like you're an average human being who stay-at-home mum. And then this is obviously not shitting on, so like, go be careful because I don't want stay-at-home mums coming for my blood. But you are busy all day and you're talking to me about biochemistry, about your ovulation and how that occurred. Like, and it's a testament to how I think powerful conception is for women and the thought of having children and how much they want to take that into their control and do everything they can to make sure it can happen.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, it's almost like a reflection on the failure of like the education system to talk about this from the beginning. Then we enter into a world where it's fairly easy access to a level of contraception where you don't really have to keep the literacy going, right? If you're going to just go with the contraceptive. And then, but this is what I wanted to ask you, because I don't want to make assumptions as a male, and as a coach who gets like a selection of type of clients that come to me. But I think it is obvious that like women will go through that learning curve very steeply as we go to conceive, you know, and then go, oh, there is a lot going on. I'm now truly starting to understand my body. And if we could get that learning curve happening much before conception, I mean, we haven't even talked about it today, but I think, we would all sort of agree, like it's so much better when a woman is thinking about conceiving years out, so that we can go, okay, let's get this health in order. Let's get these behaviors there so that we're not trying to have all that at the same time as having an expectation month in, month out of falling pregnant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's like, that's part of my questionnaire is, do you want to have kids? Are you and your partner planning on having kids? When? And if I know that time, if you say to me 6 months, we have a lot of work to do, because some women will, not some women, although the majority of women really have that, like you were saying, steep learning curve when they want to conceive. The majority of women enter that steep learning curve when they have decided to start conceiving, whereas that needs to happen well before.
What's the ideal for you?
12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
And what are you looking at 12 to 18 months? If you could go through the cycle of what questions women should be asking, what testing, vitamins, minerals, lifestyle.
Yep. So I'm looking at cycle length, luteal phase length, temperatures in your luteal phase. I'm looking at how healthy you are, your habits, your sleep, all of the basics, right?
So master the basics first. And then when do you start to get a little bit more specific to fertility and pregnancy?
About 12 months prior. We're really, because you're looking at 3 months from like a follicle going through the maturation process and becoming the dominant follicle. It's about 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what you're doing 3 months prior is going to have follow-on impact into what you're ovulating with.
And I think this is so important. I just want to clarify something here. So what we're saying by this is not to create any kind of like fear or complexity around like falling pregnant. What it is to say is like, because a client may come to you, answer the questionnaire, do all the lab work and go, oh, big tick.
Yeah.
You're actually good to go. And then you can move on from that conversation. But if it wasn't tick, 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 you would want to know now rather than 20 days before you go, oh, you want to start trying next month. That's amazing. We've got a fair bit of work to do.
Yep.
So in reality though, like how often do you get a client with 18 months?
Not that often.
Me neither.
I would say the majority are about 12 months out.
That's good though. I'd be happy with that.
It's starting to kind of move into that, whereas previously it was very much like, hey, me and my partner decide we're going to start trying from next month.
And this comes back to what we're talking about. Like that's the kind of change that we're seeing. You know what I mean? Like, and that's so good, is that like you're now experiencing clientele that are thinking about it. They're more savvy with it. They're coming to you earlier with it. That's great.
Yeah. It's like the analogy that I use is that when you go to conceive, you want to be a loaded gun that's ready to fire.
Yeah.
You don't want to find out that you load that gun and it's the bullet's not going down the chamber, that the trigger is like a little bit sticky. You don't want to find out when you're trying to
That's a really good one for actually falling pregnant. But do you have one also for how important the male and female's health is for the child, the future child and the infant? Do you have an analogy for that?
Fuck. You're putting me on my
Because I think it's one thing to think of yourself and how your pregnancy will go, but it's another thing to take yourself outside of yourself and think you're making a human, and we're all humans, right? And our ability to operate through life and the quality of life is pretty significantly dictated by our genetics and what our parents did before they conceived. So given the stakes are quite high, at least I believe they are, and I take it very seriously, how do you communicate that? And do you have like a metaphor for that, like building a foundation of a house? But even that's, to me, that's too simple because it's not about you. It's not your house.
Yeah, but I mean, like a foundation of a house, you could say in a sense where it's like, and it's so fucking hard because you want to be really mindful in these conversations, because you will have people saying, well, you know, my sibling is disabled and there's nothing wrong with their life. You know, my sibling has Down syndrome and there's nothing wrong with them. So,
but how can you say that if you're not in their body? What do you mean nothing wrong with their life?
They're happy.
Would you prefer to be disabled than them?
It's tricky. It's very tricky, and it's a very delicate conversation that when you make these kinds of statements, you have to just be very delicate and mindful of what you're saying, I think. So in that sense, the way I really look at it is that life is fucking hard enough as it is for someone who is healthy and able-bodied and has everything accessible to them. I wouldn't want to do anything that has the potential to make life harder for a child that I am having. So I think that analogy of like the house is probably a good analogy, where it's like you're building a house. You probably don't want to, you know, have the foundation cracking. You probably don't want the walls breaking.
And I think it's about working within context, right? Because it goes back to that conversation before again about like the last thing you want is a pregnant woman becoming hyper obsessed with like without like, I'll take it back to the client with hyperemesis gravidosa. You can imagine the lack of nutritional intake and what that means mentally for a woman who's thinking about the health of their unborn child. And actually speaking with her, and then when she met up with one of the other medical professionals, this wonderful lady said, listen, you have she has an older boy. You have a beautiful boy at home. You guys are so emotionally available. He has such a great set of parents. You look after his nutrition like nothing else. And so like that's the thing that you're going to bring this child into the world to. No matter what this start is, the body's going to do what it's going to do. And so from a nurture perspective, you know, you're in the top percentile, and that's what this child's going to get. And that gave her a lot of peace, you know, to realize, look, it wasn't the pregnancy that she wanted. She didn't get to focus on all the healthy nutritional habits that she's actually got like years of doing. But what she could control and what she could, you know, actively do afterwards was know that she was going to bring this child into a world and it was going to be cared for on every level, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of accepting the uncontrollable situation. If you just have HG, the word she used was surrender a lot. You must surrender, right? And I love that perspective reframe as controlling the nurturing. You can control once they come out, that's all you.
Yeah.
But then for many women and men who can control it, once you guys start to get to the 6 to 12 month mark, what conversations are you having practically to implement that would be different from basic foundational healthy habits?
6 to 12 month outs
from conceiving.
From conceiving, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Look, I think it's because my client base is obviously more women. I think going back to what we said, it's those conversations aren't as tricky or as like hard as you may think they need to be, because there's something that is just like, it just clicks in women's heads when it comes to fertility. So it's like you tell them you need to take this.
Adherence is there.
Adherence is super high. So it's like, it's not like it's this 6 to 12 month mark where we're having a really hard conversation of, hey, you need to stop drinking every single day. It's like, hey, time to cut alcohol. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, you know, with folate, with the prenatal, with zinc, omega-3s, B vitamin status. I know when you look at that stuff, but when would you look at that stuff?
I'd be looking at that still 6 to 12 months, 18 months out.
Okay, cool.
Because it might take a bit of time to fix certain things. I mean, if you're talking about what we were saying before, clients who self-sabotage, you know, they may not understand 18 months out is actually important. So you're giving yourself that buffer.
Yeah,
it's like,
clever. Yeah.
You know, they're going to self-sabotage.
Yep.
Give yourself as much time as possible.
Exactly, because if you're going to catch things like anemia or borderline or like just trends heading in the wrong direction from like a lab work perspective or nutritional status perspective, you want to have that conversation early, you know, so that you can kind of get to it. And then that just kind of like guides the behaviors that you're trying to deploy for nutrition with like a higher purpose. Like we talk about this all the time in nutrition, right? It's like, hey, what's the higher purpose? And it can't just be the scale weight.
Yeah.
You know, conceiving and falling pregnant is actually a great calling. You know, in my experience as a coach, for many of the women and men that I work with, to kind of like really instill and tie in some of the behaviors that we want to make consistent to to a higher purpose.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Yeah, but you know what you were just saying before, where it's like you can nurture after. I think it's, what are we at?
As long as it's on, we're good.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. Just checking.
What you were saying before about nurture, I think it's. So I've got 2 dogs, right? No babies, 2 dogs. One of my dogs is fucking huge. He was the runt in the litter. He was scrawny, missing hair when he came to me, ribs poking out in weird places, and he is a specimen right now. He's fucking beautiful. And that was from that initial period to, you know, being with us for 2 years, what we've managed to do in that time with his nutrition. And it's like that's so important, what you were saying before, to stress that it's like, even if your prenatal stuff was not on point, doesn't mean, you know, you shouldn't care about it, but you can make a lot of smart decisions once your child arrives to give them the best that they need.
Absolutely.
It's like sometimes you'll get a client who's like 6 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant. So a lot of like the opportunity, I suppose, to work with them on that pre-care is gone. And so the last thing you want to come in is like super heavy-handed in your communication, going, oh, well, we've missed this, we've missed that. You focus on like what you can control.
Good one.
You know, an example of this, and to tie it back into nutrition, is like, you know, when obviously I talk about omega-3s a lot, and we talk about that in terms of like, you know, health outcomes with, you know, going to term and things like that. It can be very important. It can be involved in cognitive development and other aspects of bubs as well. But you know, you may have a client who like really just, you know, doesn't like fatty fish or hasn't had some, and it's like late in the pregnancy, and it's like, well, okay, what can we focus on from this point forward? And I tell the story about, you know, Zoe, my wife. She does love fatty fish, but then throughout pregnancy, like, I'm not going to coach my wife, you know, on what she's doing with nutrition. That just doesn't get, it's not going to go down well.
You would like to keep your hair.
Yeah, I'd like to keep the relationship, right?
What hair?
So, thank you. But, and then when it came to doing the omega-3 index, I don't think she did that either, okay? But, and when it came postpartum to doing the breast milk omega-3 index, I think it was like 8 or 9 months down the track that we did it. And it came back quite low in the DHA. But what was interesting enough, though, and this goes back to the nurture, like, what did I feed these kids like as soon as possible, right?
Sardines,
like,
baby.
The sardine kids. And so I had a bit of a laugh about it, and I was like, look, not that I was taking it into my own hands, but it was just that, like, we focus on what we can. We don't put too much stress on it, like if it's not feasible. And, you know, like, you work with what you can operate with. And so as it turns out, you know, it was a good thing that we got all these sardines in. And as I said to my wife afterwards, and she said, oh, so that's not as, you know, as high as it could have been. And I said, but it's also 8 to 9 months down the track. And, you know, this comes back to the conversation about like making a baby and keeping a baby well through breast milk takes up a lot of your nutrition.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? That's actually kind of like one of the reasons why we're having this whole conversation, right? And furthermore, you're going to have multiple pregnancies, multiple babies. What do you need to be thinking about in between? You know, which is hard, because if you've got a client who has one child, is thinking about falling pregnant with a second child, again, like, they're dealing with a whole heap of new things now. You know what I mean? Fatigue, schedule, like all that thing of becoming a parent. So it's hard, but we just focus on what we can do.
There's this triangle that I created.
Hold on. Actually, before the triangle, this conversation's gone so well and I've loved so much. It's been 2 hours.
What?
And I have to go coach my the HG client. I now have to go coach. But if you guys want to keep going, go. Tell the triangle.
We'll wrap up. Leave with my triangle. So
Yes.
your triangle, right, that I created, we have one point that has enough breast milk to feed your baby. Another point has enough micronutrients to conceive again. And another point has be really lean and hot and skinny. Pick 2. Because that's all you get to pick when you're breastfeeding and you've just had a baby. Pick 2. You can either be hot and skinny and breastfeed your baby and not have enough micronutrients, or you can have enough micronutrients to conceive again and feed your baby, or hot and skinny. And
That's really good.
I love this. You know what she brings to consult calls? It's triangles and guns.
Yeah.
triangles,
The
guns, Venn
metaphors.
diagrams.
Yeah.
Liv, last thoughts, ask of the audience, or where and when people can get the Femtech.
The official launch will be in about 8 weeks. Hopefully we'll be able to open pre-orders. There's just been a lot of issues leading into it. So in about 8 weeks, we'll be able to open pre-orders. Pre-orders will be a very limited run of devices. So those will be our early adopters. They'll be the ones who have lifetime rewards. So when we open the practitioner portal, when we open the individual coaching portal where you can have more customized training, everything, they're the ones who are going to have lifetime rewards from that. And then from there, next year, hopefully mid next year, we'll be opening for another run. So there'll be limited runs each time until we're at a place where we're able to do consistent.
Where can people find that and you?
So they can find Femtech at www.femtek.co and me at Instagram, The Lifting Doula.
We didn't even talk about the doula stuff.
I know, that was
We're
my
gonna come
question.
back.
I was
Talk
hanging
about
on
the
to that the
doula.
whole time. We're gonna do a part 2 at some stage because I saw you had your first attendance to a birthing a couple of months
I gotta
back
go
on
back.
your Instagram. And so we'll get into that next time. But look, hey, thanks for coming today. That was
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Cool.
Love.